I was standing in my own apartment, the place I had worked so hard to afford, when my mother looked me dead in the eye and said the words that would change everything. "Sarah, I've decided. I'm moving in with Mark and Jessica, and you need to move out. I don't want to live with you anymore. I want a peaceful life." The room spun around me. My brother Mark smirked from the corner, his wife Jessica barely concealing her triumphant grin. After 3 years of paying every single bill, buying every piece of furniture, cooking every meal, and enduring endless demands, this was my reward. My own mother kicking me out of the apartment I was paying for. But here's the thing they didn't know yet. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. If you've ever felt used, exploited, or taken for granted by people who should love you, stay with me. This story gets better, I promise. And if you want to hear how I turned the tables on the people who tried to break me, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of standing up for yourself, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever dealt with toxic family members. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Let me take you back to where it all began 3 years before that devastating moment. It started the week after my father's funeral. I was 22, still processing the grief of losing the one person in my family who actually cared about me, when my mother Helen called me. Her voice was trembling, desperate. She told me she couldn't afford to stay in the house anymore, that she was scared and alone, that she needed her daughter. Like the dutiful child I had always been, I didn't hesitate. I had just landed a decent job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Seattle. The pay was good, better than I had ever imagined for my first real career job. I found a spacious 2-bedroom apartment in a nice neighborhood, signed the lease in my name, and told my mother she could stay with me until she got back on her feet. That was my first mistake, thinking it would be temporary. The first few weeks were manageable. Mom seemed genuinely grateful. She would occasionally cook dinner or tidy up the living room. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. She stopped helping around the house. I would come home after a 9-hour workday to find her sprawled on the couch I had bought, watching reality TV shows on the flat screen I had saved up for, surrounded by empty snack bags and unwashed dishes. When I gently suggested she might want to look for a part-time job just to keep busy and have her own spending money, she looked at me like I had slapped her. "After everything I've done for you," she hissed. "I raised you, Sarah. I fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your head. I sacrificed my entire life for you and your brother. And now that I need a little help, you want to throw me out to work some degrading job? What kind of daughter are you?" The guilt crashed over me like a wave. She was right, wasn't she? She had raised me. That had to count for something. So I swallowed my words and apologized. I told her to take her time, that I just wanted her to be happy. That became our pattern. Every time I tried to set a boundary, every time I asked for a little consideration or help, she would pull out the same weapon. The martyr routine. The guilt trip. The constant reminder of her sacrifices. And every single time I would fold like a cheap card table. The financial drain started gradually. First, it was just groceries. Mom had expensive tastes, I learned. She wanted organic produce, premium brands, steaks instead of chicken. When I looked at our grocery bill one month and saw it had nearly tripled, I mentioned maybe we could cut back a little. "Are you saying I'm not worth feeding properly?" she shot back. "After I went without so many times to make sure you and Mark had food in your bellies." Then came the shopping trips. Designer handbags. Expensive cosmetics. New clothes every week. I started noticing charges on my credit card that I didn't recognize. When I confronted her about it, she didn't even try to deny it. "I needed a few things," she said with a shrug. "You make good money now, Sarah. You can afford it. Besides, don't I deserve to have nice things after years of wearing secondhand clothes and scraping by?" I wanted to scream that I worked hard for my money, that I had my own goals and dreams, that I wanted to save up for maybe buying my own place someday or traveling. But the words died in my throat every time, strangled by years of conditioning to put her needs first. My apartment stopped feeling like my sanctuary. It felt like a prison I was paying for. I would drag myself home after long, stressful days at work, my feet aching, my mind exhausted from meetings and deadlines and office politics, only to find the kitchen a disaster zone, and my mother calling out demands from the living room. "Sarah, make me some dinner. I'm starving. Sarah, I need you to do my laundry tomorrow. Sarah, I'm out of my face cream, order me some more." Never, please. Never, thank you. Just demands and expectations, as if I were the parent and she were the spoiled teenager. I tried talking to my brother Mark about it once, about 6 months into this arrangement. We had barely spoken since Dad's funeral. He had made it clear he was too busy with his own life to deal with family drama. But I was desperate for someone to understand what I was going through. I called him one evening after Mom had screamed at me for 20 minutes because I had forgotten to pick up her favorite brand of ice cream. "Mark, I need to talk to you about Mom," I started, my voice shaking. "What about her?" His tone was immediately defensive. "She's living with me and it's getting really difficult. She doesn't contribute anything, she spends all my money, and she treats me like a servant. I was hoping maybe you could talk to her or maybe she could stay with you for a while." The laugh that came through the phone was cold and mocking. "Are you serious right now, Sarah? You want me to take on your responsibility? I have my own life, my own family to think about. Besides, you're the daughter. You're supposed to take care of Mom. That's just how it works. But Mark, I'm drowning here. I can't keep doing this alone." "Then maybe you should work harder. Make more money. Stop whining. Mom deserves to be comfortable after everything she's been through. Dad left her with nothing. The least you can do is step up." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding my phone, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The one person I thought might understand, might help, had just confirmed what I feared. I was on my own. The breaking point started to form about a year into this nightmare, though I didn't recognize it at the time. I had been working on a major project at work, pulling long hours, staying late, working weekends. It was the kind of project that could make or break my career. My boss had hinted at a promotion if I pulled it off. I was exhausted but excited. Maybe if I got that promotion and the raise that came with it, I could finally afford to move Mom into her own place nearby and reclaim some semblance of my own life. I came home one Friday evening, bone-tired but satisfied. The project had launched successfully. My boss had pulled me aside and confirmed the promotion. I was going to be a senior marketing manager. More money, more responsibility, more respect. For the first time in over a year, I felt like maybe things were looking up. Mom was in the living room with two of her friends, women I vaguely recognized from the neighborhood. They were drinking wine, my expensive wine that I had been saving for a special occasion, and laughing loudly. The apartment was a mess, even worse than usual. Empty bottles, food wrappers, makeup strewn across my coffee table. "Oh, Sarah's home," Mom announced to her friends with a dismissive wave. "About time. Sarah, be a dear and order us some food, would you? We're starving. And open another bottle of that wine. This one is almost empty." Her friends looked at me expectantly. Not a single word of greeting or acknowledgement. Just expectation that I would serve them. Something inside me cracked just a little. "Mom, I just got home from work. I'm exhausted. Can't you order your own food?" The temperature in the room dropped immediately. Mom's face transformed from relaxed to furious in seconds. "Excuse me, did you just talk back to me in front of my friends? How dare you embarrass me like this? After everything I've done for you, you can't even do this one simple thing." I felt my face burn with humiliation as her friends shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to stand my ground, to finally say all the things that had been building up inside me. But that old programming kicked in. The guilt, the shame, the fear of being the bad daughter. "I'm sorry," I muttered, pulling out my phone to order food. "What do you all want?" That night, lying in my bed in my own apartment, listening to my mother and her friends laughing and drinking my wine, I cried for the first time in months. Hot, angry tears that soaked my pillow. What had happened to me? When had I become this pathetic doormat? My father would have been so disappointed to see what I had let myself become. But I still didn't leave. I still didn't kick her out. Because even through all of it, some part of me clung to the hope that if I just tried harder, was better, did more, she would finally appreciate me. Finally love me the way I needed to be loved. Then, about 2.5 years into this living arrangement, my brother Mark and his wife Jessica showed up at my door. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had just finished cleaning the entire apartment because Mom had invited people over again without telling me, and I couldn't bear the thought of guests seeing the usual chaos. I was exhausted, my hands raw from scrubbing, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mark and Jessica standing there with wide smiles that didn't reach their eyes. I hadn't seen them in almost 2 years, not since that disastrous phone call. "Sarah," Jessica exclaimed, pushing past me into the apartment like she owned the place. "Look at this place. So cozy." Mark followed his eyes, scanning the space with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Not bad, little sister. Not bad at all." Mom emerged from her room, and I watched in amazement as she transformed. Suddenly, she was animated, affectionate, fussing over Mark like he was royalty. My son, you finally came to visit your old mother. The contrast in how she treated him versus how she treated me was stark and painful. But I pushed down the hurt and tried to be welcoming. It's good to see you guys. What brings you by? Jessica settled herself on my couch, her designer purse, which I couldn't help noticing probably cost more than my monthly rent, placed carefully beside her. Oh, we were just in the neighborhood and thought we'd check in on family. See how dear Helen is doing. Something about the way she said dear Helen made my skin crawl. But I smiled and offered them drinks, falling back into my role as the accommodating host. That first visit was just the beginning. Suddenly, Mark and Jessica started showing up regularly. At first, it was once a week, then twice. Then they were there almost every other day. And every single visit followed the same pattern. They would compliment Mom effusively, bring her small gifts, ask about her comfort and her needs. And then they would make little digs at me. Sarah, you look so tired. Are you eating enough still single, huh? That's tough. Must be hard working such a demanding job. Hope it pays well at least. The words were clothed in concern, but the undertone was always judgment. And they treated my apartment like their personal hangout. They would raid my fridge without asking. Jessica would criticize my furniture choices, my decor, my taste in everything. Mark would sprawl on my couch watching sports, leaving messes for me to clean up. They would stay late into the night making noise, keeping me awake when I had work the next morning. But the worst part was how they would whisper with Mom. Hushed conversations that would stop abruptly when I entered a room. Knowing looks exchanged over my head. I felt like an outsider in my own home, like they were plotting something, but I couldn't quite figure out what. About 3 months into their sudden appearance in our lives, Jessica started making comments about housing. You know, Helen, she would say in her syrupy, sweet voice, you really deserve better than this. I mean, it's nice that Sarah is letting you stay here, but don't you want a place where you're really valued? Where you're the priority? Mom would nod along a wistful expression on her face. You're right, dear. I do deserve more. I've sacrificed so much in my life. I should be living somewhere I'm truly appreciated. I felt like I was watching a horror movie where I could see the monster approaching but couldn't make my legs move to run. Every conversation felt like it was building towards something terrible, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Then came the family meeting. That's what Mark called it when he sent me a text one evening. Family meeting at your place tomorrow, 7 p.m. Be there. No asking if I was available. No explanation of what it was about. Just a command. I came home from work that Tuesday to find all 3 of them already there sitting in my living room like a tribunal. Mom was in the center of the couch, Mark and Jessica flanking her like bodyguards. There was an empty chair facing them, clearly meant for me. The setup alone made my stomach drop. Sit down, Sarah, Mark said, his voice cold and authoritative. We need to talk. I sat, my hands trembling slightly. Whatever this was, it wasn't good. Jessica leaned forward, her face arranged in an expression of fake sympathy that made me want to scream. Sarah, we've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About Helen, about family, about responsibility. We've noticed, Mark cut in, that Mom doesn't seem very happy here. She's told us about how you treat her, how you make her feel like a burden, how you begrudge every dollar spent on her comfort. My mouth fell open. What? That's not true. I've given her everything. Have you? Jessica's voice was sharp now, the false sweetness dropping away. Because from what we hear, you complain constantly. You make her feel guilty for existing. You treat this place like it's only yours when she's family, and should be treated with respect. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to defend me, to tell the truth about how much I had sacrificed and endured. But she just looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line. After much discussion, Mark continued, standing up as if he were delivering a verdict. We've decided that Mom will be moving in with Jessica and me. We have a house, plenty of space, and we're prepared to give her the life she deserves. The life of comfort and appreciation that she's earned. For a moment, I felt relief. Actual, genuine relief. She was leaving. I would finally have my space back, my peace, my life. Okay, I said carefully. When? This weekend, Jessica said. We've already arranged everything. We'll come with a moving truck on Saturday. But here's the thing, Sarah, Mark's voice took on a harder edge. This apartment is too big for just you. And frankly, you've proven you can't handle the responsibility of taking care of family. So we think it's best if you move out too. The words didn't make sense at first. Move out. This is my apartment. My name is on the lease. Yes, but Mom needs stability, Jessica said smoothly. She can't handle another move in a few months when your lease is up. So we'll take over the lease, transfer it into Mark's name, and you can find somewhere smaller, more suitable for a single woman with no responsibilities. The room was spinning. You can't be serious. This is my home. I pay for everything here. Oh, please, Mark scoffed. Dad left Mom enough money that she contributed plenty. Stop acting like you did this all alone. I turned to my mother, desperate now. Mom, tell them. Tell them the truth. Tell them that Dad didn't leave any money, that I've paid for everything. Every single thing in this apartment, I bought it. Every bill, every piece of furniture, every dish, every towel. Me. Tell them. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom shifted uncomfortably, still not meeting my eyes. Mark's voice was uncertain now. What is she talking about? Finally, Helen spoke, her voice small and defensive. Well, there might not have been as much as I thought. But Sarah makes good money. She can afford it. And besides, I'm her mother. She should want to take care of me. I watched as the realization dawned on Mark and Jessica's faces. Watched the calculation happen behind their eyes. They had thought they were getting a mother with money to care for them. Instead, they were getting a financial burden. But instead of backing down, instead of apologizing for their presumption, Jessica's expression hardened into something ugly. Well, regardless of who paid for what, Helen is family, and she needs to be with people who actually care about her, not someone who's going to throw receipts in her face. That's right, Mark added, recovering his aggressive stance. You've been selfish enough, Sarah. It's time for you to step aside and let people who actually love Mom take care of her. And then my mother, the woman I had given up so much for, the woman I had let drain me physically, emotionally, and financially, looked at me and delivered the killing blow. Sarah, I've decided. I'm moving in with Mark and Jessica. And you need to move out. I don't want to live with you anymore. I want a peaceful life. The words hit me like physical blows. Mom, how can you say that after everything I've done for you? Done for me, her voice rose defensive and angry. What have you done? You've made me feel like a burden every single day. You're just the tail end of my life, Sarah. I raised you, fed you, clothed you. That was my sacrifice. You owe me. Mark and Jessica were smiling now, triumphant. They thought they'd won, thought they'd successfully painted me as the villain and themselves as the heroes. You have 2 weeks, Mark said dismissively. 2 weeks to pack up your things and get out. We'll be here next Saturday to move Mom's stuff. Mom doesn't have any stuff, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Everything here is mine. Jessica laughed, actually laughed. Oh, please. The furniture, the appliances, that all belongs to the household. You can take your clothes and your personal items, but the rest stays. Consider it your final contribution to your mother's well-being. They left shortly after that, leaving me sitting alone in my apartment, my home surrounded by things I had worked so hard to afford. Every piece had a memory. The couch I had saved 3 months for. The TV I had gotten on sale after watching prices for weeks. The dishes I had carefully selected, building my adult life piece by piece. And they wanted to take it all. But more than the stuff, what hurt was the betrayal. The absolute, complete betrayal. I had given 3 years of my life, thousands upon thousands of dollars, my peace of mind, my mental health, my happiness. And this was my reward. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. A strange calm was settling over me, replacing the shock and hurt. It was the calm of absolute clarity. They wanted to take everything from me. Fine. But they were going to learn a very important lesson first. The next morning, I called in sick to work and went to see my friend David. David and I had gone to college together, and he had become a successful attorney specializing in contract law and real estate. Over coffee, I told him everything. Every detail, every receipt, every text message. He listened carefully, taking notes, his expression growing more serious. When I finished, he sat back and shook his head. Sarah, you know you don't have to let them do this, right? This is your apartment. Your belongings. You have every legal right to refuse. I know, I said. But I'm not going to refuse. I'm going to let them think they've won. And then I'm going to show them exactly what they've actually won. Understanding dawned on David's face, and a slow smile spread across it. You want to let them have the apartment? Empty, I confirmed. I want to let them have an empty apartment. Everything in there, down to the last spoon I purchased. I have receipts for all of it. The lease is in my name, expires in 2 weeks. I'm not going to renew it. So they'll have exactly 2 weeks to figure out where they're going to live, sleeping on a bare floor with nothing. David laughed, pulling out his laptop. Oh, this is beautiful. Evil but beautiful. Let's make sure we have all our ducks in a row. You're going to need documentation for everything. We spent the next 3 days preparing. I gathered every receipt, every bank statement, every proof of purchase. I documented everything in the apartment with photos and serial numbers. I contacted my landlord and confirmed I would not be renewing the lease, and no, I would not agree to transfer it to anyone else. I found a new apartment across town, a beautiful one-bedroom, with huge windows and a balcony, and put down a deposit. I arranged for movers and storage. During this time, Mark and Jessica came by several more times, each visit more insufferable than the last. They would walk through the apartment, pointing at my things, discussing what they were going to keep and what they might sell or donate. This couch is pretty worn out, Jessica would say, running her hand over the fabric I had painstakingly vacuumed every week. We'll probably get rid of it. The TV's okay, Mark would add. Not as big as I'd like, but it'll do until we can afford better. Mom would follow them around, nodding along, occasionally casting glances at me that might have been guilt but were more likely fear that I would ruin their plans. I said nothing. Just smiled blandly and let them believe they had broken me. The night before moving day, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. I had packed all my personal belongings, my clothes, my books, my photographs, anything that had sentimental value. Everything else, all the furniture and household items, I had scheduled to be moved to either my new apartment or into storage. The movers would arrive at 8 a.m. Mark and Jessica had said they'd be there at 10 to move Mom's things. I woke up at 6, took a long shower in my apartment for the last time, and got dressed carefully. I wanted to look good for this. I did my makeup precisely, wore my best professional outfit, the one I saved for important client meetings. If this was going to be the last time I saw these people, I wanted them to remember me looking strong. The movers arrived right on time. I had warned them it might be a complicated job, but they were professionals. As I directed them to start with my bedroom, I heard a key turn in the front door. They'd made themselves copies of my key without asking, of course. Mark, Jessica, and Helen walked in, stopping short when they saw the moving truck outside and the movers carrying out my dresser. "What's going on?" Jessica demanded. "You're not supposed to move until after we get Mom settled." "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, my voice dripping with false politeness. "Did I give you the impression you were in charge of my schedule?" These movers had this time slot available, so I took it. I need to be out by the end of the lease anyway. Mark's eyes narrowed. "Fine. Just don't take anything that belongs to Mom." I smiled. "Of course not. I would never." For the next hour, they watched as the movers packed up my bedroom furniture. When the movers came back into the living room, I pointed to the couch. "That one next, please." "Wait, what?" Helen stood up quickly from where she'd been sitting. "That's the living room furniture. That stays." "Does it?" I pulled out my phone, showing them the receipt. "According to this receipt dated 3 years ago with my name and my credit card number, this couch belongs to me." Jessica's face was turning red. "You can't take the couch. What are we supposed to sit on?" "I don't know," I said cheerfully. "The floor. You could get some nice cushions." "Sarah, stop being ridiculous." Mark stepped forward, his voice taking on a threatening tone. "The furniture stays. You're not taking it." I turned to David, who had arrived just a few minutes before and was standing by the door with a briefcase. "David, could you explain the legal situation to my family?" David stepped forward, professional and calm. "Certainly. I'm David Chen, Sarah's attorney. Everything in this apartment, with the exception of Miss Helen's personal clothing and effects, was purchased by Sarah. She has documentation proving ownership. As these are her personal property, she has every right to take them with her. But Mom needs these things." Jessica's voice was getting shrill now. "She's an elderly woman. You can't leave her with nothing." "Elderly," I laughed. "She's 62 and in perfect health. She's more than capable of working and providing for herself. She just chose not to for the past 3 years." The movers continued working, now moving to the TV and entertainment center. Helen was starting to look panicked, the reality of the situation finally dawning on her. "Sarah, honey, please. Let's talk about this. I'm sure we can work something out." "Oh, now you want to talk." I kept my voice steady, but I couldn't hide the edge. "After you told me to get out of my own apartment. After you told me you wanted a peaceful life away from me. After you let Mark and Jessica treat me like garbage in my own home. Now you want to work something out." "I didn't mean those things." Helen's voice was pleading now. "I was just upset. You know how I get. I do know, I agreed. I know very well. I've known for 3 years. Mark was frantically looking around doing calculations. Wait, if Dad didn't leave Mom any money, how is she supposed to pay for all of this? How is she supposed to afford rent? That's a really good question, Mark, I said. Maybe you should ask Mom about that, since you know she's going to be your responsibility now. The three of them stared at each other, realization and horror dawning on their faces. Jessica turned on Helen, her voice vicious. You told us you had money. You said your husband left you well provided for. That's the only reason we agreed to take you in. I thought there would be something, Helen said weakly. I thought Sarah was exaggerating about paying for everything. You lying old witch, Jessica's mask had completely dropped now. We don't have room for a freeloader. Our house barely fits the two of us. And you expect us to support you. But you promised, Helen was crying now. You said you'd give me a wonderful life. That was when we thought you had money, Mark shouted. We're not running a charity here. I stood back and watched my family implode in real time. And I won't lie, the satisfaction that flooded through me was ice cold and absolutely delicious. The movers worked with mechanical efficiency around the chaos, completely unfazed by the drama unfolding. They'd probably seen worse. The living room was nearly bare, now just empty spaces where my furniture had been like missing teeth in a smile. The kitchen was next, and I watched with quiet pleasure as they wrapped my dishes in paper, the same dishes I'd carefully selected from Target on sale, building my adult life piece by piece. Jessica's gasp was almost comical when the movers picked up the microwave. The microwave. Sarah, you're taking the microwave. Her voice cracked on the last word, disbelief written all over her face. I turned to her, slowly letting the moment stretch. I'm taking everything, Jessica. Every single thing. The refrigerator stays only because it belongs to the landlord. But everything else, I gestured around the rapidly emptying apartment. Every fork, every towel, every light bulb I replaced. Mine. All of it. Mine. The words landed like slaps. I could see the reality finally penetrating their thick skulls. You can't do this, Mark lunged forward, his face flushed red with desperation and rage. Mom will have nothing. She'll be sleeping on a bare floor. I met his eyes without flinching. My voice came out steady, almost pleasant. Then I guess you better figure something out, big brother. You have exactly 2 weeks. The lease expires on the 15th. After that, this apartment reverts to the landlord and anyone still here will be trespassing. I'm sure the police will be very understanding when they have to remove you. The color drained from Helen's face. 2 weeks, her voice was barely audible, strangled. But Sarah, you said we had time to arrange things. You said, no. I cut her off sharply. I never said that. You assumed. You assumed a lot of things, didn't you? The lease was always set to expire. I told you that 3 years ago when you moved in. Remember, I said it was temporary. I said you could stay until you got back on your feet. That was 3 years ago, Mom. 3 years. David, who had been quietly observing from near the door, chose that moment to step forward. He opened his briefcase with deliberate precision, pulling out a folder thick with documents. I would also like to note for the record that Sarah has been extraordinarily, almost unreasonably generous throughout this arrangement. She provided housing, food, utilities, and personal expenses for Miss Helen for 36 months. According to these itemized statements, he held up the papers. Sarah is owed approximately $87,463 in unpaid costs. He paused, letting that astronomical number sink in. I watched their faces cycle through shock, denial, and dawning horror. That breaks down to roughly $2,400 per month, David continued, his lawyer voice crisp and professional. Sarah has chosen not to pursue legal repayment of this debt, which I must say I strongly advised against. But she's decided to be merciful. So you're walking away, owing her nearly $90,000, and she's letting it go. I'd say that's more than fair. The number detonated in the room like a grenade. $87,000. Nearly $90,000. That's what my mother cost me. That's what my kindness, my guilt, my desperate need to be a good daughter had cost me. Nearly $90,000 of my future, my dreams, my life poured into a bottomless pit of entitlement and ingratitude. Helen's legs gave out. She didn't just sit down, she collapsed her knees, hitting the hardwood floor with a crack that made me wince despite everything. She crumpled there, her whole body convulsing with sobs that sounded almost animal. For just a second, just one tiny second, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy. Then I remembered every sneer, every demand, every time she'd weaponized my love against me, and the sympathy died as quickly as it had sparked. Jessica rounded on Mark, her voice climbing to a shriek. $90,000. Mark, do you understand what that means? She's been supporting your mother for $90,000. Where did you think the money was coming from? Where did you think she was getting all those designer bags and expensive groceries? I didn't know. Mark shot back, his voice just as loud. You're the one who said Mom had money. You're the one who wanted to take her in. Because you told me your father left her an inheritance. Jessica's face was twisted with rage and humiliation. You said there would be money. You promised me we'd be taken care of. I thought there was. Mark turned to Helen, who was still sobbing on the floor. Mom, you said Dad left you money. You said you had savings. Helen looked up, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers, her face blotchy and swollen. I thought there would be something. I thought maybe there was something I didn't know about. I thought Sarah was exaggerating about paying for everything. How was I supposed to know? How were you supposed to know? I couldn't help it, I laughed. Actually laughed. It came out harsh and bitter. Because I told you, Mom. Every single month when I paid the bills. Every single time you asked for money and I transferred it to you. Every single time you criticized my furniture or my food choices while I was buying them with my own money. You knew. You just didn't care. The movers were in the bedroom now. I could hear them disassembling my bed frame, the metallic clinks and scrapes providing a soundtrack to my family's meltdown. Jessica and Mark were screaming at each other now, years of marital resentment suddenly spilling out. Helen sat on the floor, rocking back and forth, her hands pressed against her face. When the movers emerged carrying my TV, the beautiful 55-inch smart TV I'd saved up for 6 months to buy, Mark suddenly lunged forward with a desperate energy that startled everyone. Wait. Stop. At least leave us something. Just the TV. Come on, Sarah, just one thing. We need at least one thing. His hand shot out, grabbing for the corner of the TV. The mover, holding that end, pulled back, startled. David moved faster than I'd ever seen him move, positioning himself between Mark and the movers. His voice dropped to a tone I'd never heard from him before, low and dangerous. Sir, I strongly suggest you step back right now. What you're attempting is theft. I have 3 witnesses, video footage from the security camera in the hall, and a very short fuse for watching people try to steal from my client. If you touch that television, I will have the police here in 5 minutes, and I will personally ensure you're charged to the fullest extent of the law. Do we understand each other? Mark's hand dropped. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured balloon. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, and I watched him realize what was happening. Really realize it. His wife was still screaming, alternating between berating him and his mother. His mother was sobbing into her hands. And my entire apartment, his imagined kingdom, was being dismantled and removed piece by piece while he sat helpless against the wall. The movers continued their work with impressive professionalism. They'd clearly dealt with worse family drama. One of them actually offered me a water bottle at one point, which made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. It took 4 hours total. 4 long hours to pack up 3 years of my life and load it onto that truck. 4 hours of listening to them fight, cry, plead, and rage while my belongings disappeared one box at a time. The movers took apart my bed, wrapped my dishes, boxed my books, loaded my furniture. They took the toaster I'd gotten for Christmas from a work friend, the coffee maker I'd splurged on, the throw pillows that matched my couch, the art prints I'd carefully chosen for the walls, the kitchen knives, the bathroom towels, the shower curtain, every single thing that had made this apartment feel like home. When the last box was loaded onto the truck, when there was nothing left but empty rooms and 3 broken people sitting on a bare floor, I took one final walk through the space. My footsteps echoed now. The rooms looked so much smaller, empty, like the soul had been sucked out of them. The afternoon light came through the windows at a different angle, illuminating dust motes floating in the air and rectangle patches on the walls where my pictures had hung. I stood in the doorway of what had been the living room, looking at the 3 of them. They were arranged on the floor like a tragic tableau. Helen in the center, still crying but quietly now exhausted. Mark to her left, his back against the wall, staring at nothing. Jessica slightly apart from them both, her arms wrapped around herself, her perfect makeup destroyed by tears and rage. They looked up at me, and I saw the exact moment understanding truly hit them. Not just the surface understanding that I was taking my things. The deeper understanding of what this meant. They were experiencing right now in this moment exactly what they'd made me feel for 3 years. Worthless. Used. Empty. Abandoned. Sarah. Helen's voice was hoarse from crying, barely more than a whisper. Please. I'm your mother. You can't do this to me. I'm your mother. I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had given birth to me, who had raised me, who I had loved so desperately and tried so hard to please. You were my mother, I said quietly. Past tense. But a real mother doesn't exploit her child like a renewable resource. A real mother doesn't stand by silent while her son and daughter-in-law abuse and demean her daughter. A real mother doesn't choose the fantasy of money over the reality of love. You stopped being my mother somewhere along the way. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe it happened all at once and I just didn't want to see it. But it happened. And I'm done pretending it didn't. Jessica stirred her voice, defeated and small. Where are we supposed to go, Sarah? What are we supposed to do? I felt nothing looking at her. Not anger, not satisfaction, not pity. Nothing. That's not my problem anymore, Jessica. It never was my problem, but I let you make it my problem. You made your choices. You chose to believe lies about inheritance money instead of valuing the person who was actually supporting you. You chose cruelty over kindness. You chose greed over gratitude. You chose to treat me like garbage while living in the home I provided. So now you get to live with those choices. I turned to Mark and he couldn't even meet my eyes. You know what's funny, Mark? What's actually hilarious? If you had just been kind, if you had just treated me like family, like a human being worthy of basic respect, I probably would have helped Mom. I probably would have helped her find her own place, made sure she was comfortable and stable. I might have even helped you if you'd ever asked nicely instead of demanding and demeaning. But you couldn't do that, could you? You had to be greedy. You had to take everything. You had to kick me while I was down and laugh while you did it. So now you get nothing. Not one single thing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keyring. The apartment key caught the light as I held it up. This is the only key I have. I already gave the other copy back to the landlord when I told him I wouldn't be renewing the lease. You have exactly 2 weeks before this lease expires. On the 16th, if anyone is still in this apartment, the landlord will begin eviction proceedings. He's already got another tenant lined up, very eager to move in. So I'd suggest you start making phone calls. Good luck finding a place that will take all 3 of you with no money, no furniture, and I'm guessing no security deposit. I let the key fall. It hit the hardwood floor with a small metallic clink that seemed to echo in the empty space. Then I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, Helen's wails started up again, desperate and keening. Sarah. Sarah, please. Don't leave me like this. I'm your mother. Sarah. I didn't turn around. Didn't pose. Didn't hesitate. I walked out of that apartment and out of their lives, and with each step I felt lighter. Freer. Like I was shedding chains I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. David was waiting by his car, leaning against the driver's side door. When he saw my face, he straightened up, concerned. You okay? I stopped and took a deep breath. Real fresh air, not the suffocating atmosphere of that apartment. The sun was warm on my face. Birds were singing somewhere nearby. The world was still turning, still beautiful, still full of possibility. You know what I said, and I was surprised to find I was smiling. Really smiling. I actually am. I'm more than okay. He studied me for a moment, then grinned. That was pretty brutal in there. Absolutely savage. Remind me to never ever get on your bad side. They had it coming, I said, and there wasn't a trace of doubt in my voice. They thought they could break me. Thought they could take everything I'd worked for and leave me with nothing but guilt and obligation. They thought I was weak. They thought I would just take it forever. They thought wrong, David said softly. They thought very, very wrong. I followed the moving truck to my new apartment, this beautiful space that was truly completely mine. No toxic energy poisoning the air. No demands waiting when I walked through the door. No guilt trips or manipulation or constant erosion of my sense of self. As I walked through the empty rooms, already planning where everything would go, already imagining my life in this space, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Mark. The text read, "You're going to regret this. You've destroyed your own family. Mom could have a heart attack from the stress. Her blood will be on your hands. You're dead to all of us." I stared at the message for a long moment, waiting for the guilt to come, for the fear for the usual response that would have had me running back to fix things. But all I felt was peace. I blocked his number. Then Jessica's. Then after a moment's hesitation, my mother's too. The next 2 weeks were busy. I threw myself into settling into my new place, arranging furniture, decorating, making it feel like home. A real home this time, not just a place where I kept my things between work and obligations. David helped me, as did some friends from work I'd lost touch with over the past 3 years because I'd been too busy being a servant to my own family. I heard through mutual acquaintances what happened to them. Mark and Jessica's marriage was on the rocks, the stress of suddenly having a dependent they couldn't afford driving a wedge between them. They'd tried to negotiate a lease extension, but the landlord refused, already having another tenant lined up. Helen ended up moving in with them, temporarily crammed into their tiny house, sleeping on an air mattress in their spare room that doubled as Jessica's home office. Apparently, the three of them fought constantly. Jessica demanded Helen get a job. Helen said she was too old. Mark sided with his wife, saying they couldn't afford to keep a freeloader. The words I'd heard so many times were now being thrown at my mother, and I wondered if she finally understood how it felt. About a month after I moved out, I was at a coffee shop near my new place when I saw her. Helen was sitting at a table by the window, looking older, somehow more tired. She was wearing clothes I recognized from years ago, no more designer bags or expensive cosmetics. When our eyes met, she stood up and started walking toward me. I could have left, could have walked out before she reached me. But I stayed. I wanted to hear what she had to say. "Sarah," she said, her voice shaking. "Please, I need to talk to you." "So talk," I said, not making it easy for her. "I'm sorry," she began. "I'm so sorry. You were right. About everything. Mark and Jessica don't care about me. They just wanted money. And I've been so horrible to you. The way I treated you, the things I said. I don't know what I was thinking." "You were thinking you could take advantage of me forever," I said calmly. "You were thinking I would always be there, always give in, always sacrifice myself for you. You were thinking of me as a resource, not a daughter." Tears were streaming down her face. I know that now. And I'm begging you, please give me another chance. Let me make it right. I'll do anything. Anything," I asked. "Will you get a job? Will you pay your own bills? Will you respect my boundaries and my space? Will you acknowledge all the sacrifices I made? Will you pay me back the $87,000 you owe me?" She flinched at each question. "Sarah, you know I can't pay that back. But I could try. I could get a job, I could." "You could have done all of that 3 years ago," I interrupted. "You could have been a partner instead of a parasite. You could have chosen to be my mother instead of my burden. But you didn't. And now you're here because Mark and Jessica kicked you out, aren't you? Because they're done with you now that they know there's no money. If they hadn't kicked you out, you wouldn't be here." She couldn't meet my eyes. That was answer enough. "I'm not your safety net anymore," I said quietly. "I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your ATM or your servant or your emotional punching bag. I'm your daughter, and you treated me like I was worthless. So no more. I'm not giving you another chance. I'm done. But where will I go? What will I do?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But you're a capable adult. You'll figure it out. The same way you expected me to figure out how to pay for everything, to do everything, to be everything for you while getting nothing in return. You'll survive. Whether you thrive or not, that's up to you." I stood up to leave, but she grabbed my arm. "Sarah, please. I'm your mother. Doesn't that mean anything?" I gently removed her hand. "It used to. It meant everything. But you taught me that biology doesn't make a family. Love does. Respect does. Care does. And you gave me none of those things. So no, it doesn't mean anything anymore." I walked away, and this time I didn't look back. 6 months later, I'm thriving. My career has taken off since I'm no longer drained and exhausted all the time. I got another promotion. I've reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I've started dating someone, a kind and respectful person who treats me like I matter. David and I are closer than ever, and he jokes that he should charge me a finder's fee for helping me find my backbone. I've heard through the grapevine that Helen eventually found a job at a grocery store, that she's renting a room in a house with several other older women. Mark and Jessica are separated, possibly heading for divorce. The stress of my mother living with them apparently revealed cracks in their relationship that had always been there. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty. If I regret being so harsh, so final, so cold in cutting them off, the answer is no. Not even a little bit. What I did wasn't revenge, not really. It was justice. It was finally, after years of being used and manipulated and degraded, standing up and saying enough. They wanted everything. They got nothing. And I got my life back. Here's what I've learned through all of this. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Standing up for yourself isn't cruel. Walking away from people who hurt you, even if they're family, isn't wrong. Blood doesn't entitle anyone to abuse you, exploit you, or treat you as less than human. Real love doesn't drain you. Real love doesn't keep score. Real love doesn't demand endless sacrifice with no appreciation. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to walk away and let toxic people experience the consequences of their actions. Not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation. Not because you hate them, but because you love yourself more. I'm not the woman I was 3 years ago, always apologizing, always giving, always trying to earn love from people who saw me as a tool. I'm stronger now. Happier. Free. And that's worth more than any relationship built on guilt and obligation. My apartment is beautiful. My life is mine. And for the first time in a long time, when I look in the mirror, I like the person looking back at me. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic relationship? How did you find the strength to put yourself first? And if you're still in that situation, still being used and unappreciated, what's holding you back from claiming your own life? Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go of the people who are drowning you. Even if they're family. Especially if they're family. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt trapped by obligation or guilt, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength, setting boundaries, and choosing yourself. And drop a comment below sharing your own experience or advice for anyone going through something similar. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own courage. Remember, you deserve respect. You deserve appreciation. You deserve to be more than someone's meal ticket. And you deserve to put yourself first. Don't ever forget that.